Welcome back to Open Line. I'm Matthew Torres. We are talking about the Sanctuary City Bill, and with me today are Stephanie Teatro with Turk and also Mary Catherine Harcombe with the Public Defender's Office. So I know we have a caller on the line. I believe this is Lucy. What is your question? Thank you for calling.
Hey, y'all. Well, I've got several, and I've tried to get these questions answered, okay? And
all right, we're going to go through them.
Because let me throw this out there straight out front. I'm an independent. I don't belong to any club like Democrat or Republican. I'll tell them all to go to you-know-where if I think that they're wrong, okay? So I want that to be made plain and clear right here. But I thought we had already passed a law, no sanctuary cities. And I've tried to understand this bill and the ignorance of it. And from listening to y'all tonight and what I've studied, this violates states' rights. This makes the state of Tennessee do the Fed's jobs and pay for it. I'm a taxpayer. I'm going to pay to house and feed these people that they force them to pick them up in the hospital. I am going to pay for lawsuits when a nurse at an ER does not comply with whatever they are supposed to know about immigration law, and they tase a nurse, and we get sued for it, and the taxpayers, Metro or the county or the state, get sued for this. I'm going to pay for this. I think this is the Fed's way to get out of doing their job, and I'll tell you what I've been thinking that this is. Instead of getting off their butts and going in these factories, these sweatshops, and finding that they're violating all kinds of federal and state and local laws and picking these people up, they're waiting for them to be pulled over for a traffic ticket. You know what I'm saying? And then I'm going to pay for this. So people need to wake up and look at what this really is. And before long, I can hear it coming now, this needs to be privatized. And you and I locally have to pay for something that's already been funded by the federal government. And that's how I see it. Now, as far as what's legal and illegal, you could have come here 10 years ago on a visa and it expired 6 months ago, and you're an illegal resident of this country. Doesn't mean that you're Irish or what you are. You got my drift? And now you're on the down low working illegally somewhere that some business is allowing you to do that, and they're not doing anything to these business people, and they're making a killing. That's where they should start, and the federal government should go in there and do this. And I got one last question. I want you to explain this to me. I've been watching Diane Black's commercial showing an arrow coming from the Texas to Mexican border to Memphis, Tennessee, saying that we are importing all these illegals. Can you tell me what that is? I didn't know that Memphis was a slave city, and we were bringing them into Memphis in the dark and sending them out in Tennessee. Can you tell me what she means by this? And I'll hang up and take your comments off the air. Thank you.
Lucy just unloaded a lot of thoughts.
Yeah,
and
Stephanie.
But let's, I mean, she brought some points that you were writing down about. What would you like to respond to that?
So, I mean, I think kudos to Lucy for really digging into this bill and trying to compare it to the last bill, because again, it would be easy for people to listen to proponents of this bill and say, yeah, I don't like sanctuary cities or whatever I think that means, but what this is, in many ways, is an unfunded mandate for local governments. It's not even the state government paying for it. What our state legislators have told local communities is that your local government will do the work of the federal government, will detain folks for the federal government, all at local taxpayer expense. But more than just the resources we're asking local cities to spend to do the work of the federal government, we're also taking those resources away from other priorities. We know that we have an opioid crisis in this country. We know people are concerned about domestic violence and other crimes in their neighborhoods. And if this bill becomes law, we're telling police, take all your time and precious resources, and instead of doing the important work that's priority for this community, do the work of the federal government. And I'm not familiar with the particular campaign ad that Lucy's referring to, but many candidates from across the state are really trying to tap into the worst fears and instincts of Tennesseans and make people vote from a sense of fear instead of a sense of hope. And there's a lot of misinformation about how or why people are coming, but the truth is immigrant families are here to find a better life, to raise their families, to contribute to this community, and to try to make Tennessee a better state, just like the rest of us.
Mary Kath, what stood out to you?
Resources. I have that word written and circled, and I think that was what Lucy was asking about, and I think that really is what this comes down to. And first of all, I'd like to also commend Lucy for, I think, doing a very good job of looking at both sides of the fence. This is such a polarizing debate that too often people just have their camp and they're planted there, and so they don't think about any of the nuances or the resource questions about these issues. But that's really what we need to look at with this bill. What this bill does is it takes discretion away from our local governments and our local agencies. That's it. It prevents our local, and again, we're not talking city councils, but our local sheriff's department, our local police department, from deciding how they would best spend their resources. I think it is, we're obviously in Nashville. When I started years ago, the relationship between the police department and the immigrant community was pretty bad. And the police department has done a...
What do you mean by bad?
I mean that we had 287G at that point, which meant that everybody who went to jail was automatically screened for immigration, and most people were automatically picked up by immigration. So what that did is it created a lot of mistrust, and we saw people, large numbers of people who wouldn't call the police if they were victims of crime, wouldn't call the police to report crimes. As a defense lawyer, we saw every day in court witnesses for either the defense or the prosecution that wouldn't come to court because they were afraid that they could get caught up in ICE. And this was a real problem because, as I've said, when you don't have the laws equally applied, when you don't have police able to interact with communities, it makes all of us less safe. Our police department has done a really great job of reaching out to these communities, of reaching out especially to victims and witnesses in these communities. And we've seen in the past, again, about 10 years, a higher rate of people coming to court, of people reporting crimes, and I think a higher success rate for the police department. What this bill does is it takes away a lot of the tools that our police department has used to make those positive changes.
What do you guys want to say when she mentioned employers? She mentioned people who hire and knowing their status, keeping them on kind of from the federal standpoint, targeting them. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's also a distinction between sort of good employers and bad employers. Like she said, there are often employers who are taking advantage of people's sort of immigration status to have really awful working conditions and really paying really awful wages, which is harmful for workers across the board. But in general, we also know that our economy needs workers. We need immigrant workers to make our, to build our city, to make our economy run. And so I think the fundamental part is that we need to update our immigration laws to better serve both families and our economy. But in terms of enforcing our immigration laws, again, where I would agree with her is that we rarely see, corrective behavior on these bad actors and these bad employers. What we really see is cracking down on hardworking immigrant families, and that doesn't make anyone less safe. It doesn't change the practices of employers. It just makes a flashy news story.
For you?
That's outside of my realm. I'm criminal justice world.
Now, I do want to touch base since Senator Mark Green is one of the sponsors of the bill. I'm just pulling up what he sent to us whenever this bill did pass, is saying it strengthened Tennessee's law on sanctuary cities, has passed, the bill adds teeth to existing laws by prohibiting local governments that enact cities from receiving future economic development grants from the state, expands the definition of an illegal sanctuary city policy to verbal directives and other means. This is the quote: "We've seen time and time again the consequences of illegal immigration can be severe and sometimes even deadly. This bill puts Tennesseans first," which I'm sure Dying Black also kind of touches base. But your response to that, how it puts teeth and that illegal immigration can be severe, sometimes even deadly?
I unfortunately, I feel like this is just using a lot of scary words to make people feel like this bill is somehow going to protect them. Again, where he does speak accurately is that this bill really expands the definition of so-called sanctuary cities to include verbal directives. Again, this bill is prohibiting local police from trying to encourage immigrants to report dangerous criminals. Again, in the Waffle House shooting just a few weeks ago, where a violent shooter was on the loose in a very diverse, immigrant-heavy neighborhood, that is what is deadly. That is what is dangerous. But by drawing a line and putting a wedge between cops and the community that could help solve that crime, that is what makes our communities much more dangerous.
All right, we do have another caller. Hey, Judy, thank you for calling. What's your question?
Yes, I don't mean to sound ugly or anything, but when people have broken the law, and we're obviously not doing a good job of rounding up, I'll say, the people that are here illegally, whether they've stayed too long on their visa or they've come across the lines illegally. I don't care who takes care of that. I don't care if it's the principal at the elementary school. I don't care if it's the employer. I really don't care who it is, because somebody needs to do it, and we're obviously not doing a good job of doing it. Like the lady said earlier, we have employers that are hiring illegal people, and they know it, so somebody needs to step up, do the right thing. I know if I break the law, I'm going to get in trouble. So everybody that's here that's broken the law, that's not abiding by it, needs to be, reprimanded, sent back. That's just the way I feel about it. I'll hang up and listen to your comments.
Do you guys agree with Judy?
So, I mean, I think that, immigration is complicated, and I think, I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of people who have lived for many decades in this country without immigration status, who are undocumented, and they would do anything to have the chance to get right with the system, to apply for citizenship, and get on an earned pathway to citizenship. People are ready to get in that line. People are ready to sign up for whatever program, to pay whatever fees or fines. People want more than anything to have documentation. Again, it's a conversation our country needs to have about how we want to go about that, what kind of laws we want to have, and how we want to enforce them. And so we encourage and want to have that robust debate with our federal members of Congress. But again, in the meantime, while Congress has really failed to have a serious conversation about immigration, I know that I want my neighbors to report if there are robberies in our neighborhoods. I want to make sure that the tens of thousands of U.S. citizen kids who have an immigrant parent are going to school and getting the best education that they can, because the future of our state depends on their success. I want to make sure all families feel safe getting vaccines, right? That is about the safety and security of our whole community, and we can't jeopardize that because we're angry that the federal government has failed to update our immigration laws.
Before we go to break, do you want to add anything to that?
I'm a defense lawyer, so I want to address this issue of broken laws. We have a whole different variety of levels of law and levels of ways that we choose to enforce those laws. So Judy, I am willing to bet that within the past year you have broken a criminal law of this state. I know I have. Don't tell anyone, but I speed. Sometimes I cross the street not at a crosswalk. Those are criminal laws that are broken. But we all know I'm not going to get arrested for those, and I think we all mostly agree it's not worth arresting people for those laws, because although they are technically laws that are on the books, it's not worth the use of our resources to go after the person crossing the street in the middle instead of at the corner. We all want our resources to go after people who are committing real crimes, violence, theft, drug abuse, all of those. And that's similar here. And I'm going to come back to the issue that I keep harping on, which is that this bill takes the discretion away from our local agencies to decide how our resources should be addressed or should be directed.
Well, the guy earlier said that, the worry is that those who come here legally without the documentation are also criminals who have committed violent crimes. But you said earlier, Mary Catherine, as far as statistically wise, that's not necessarily the case. Is that so?
That is absolutely so. So I want to give you two separate sort of areas of statistics. One is that, again, in terms of sort of across the board crimes, numerous studies have shown American-born people born in the United States, commit crimes at a higher rate. Another interesting statistic that I find from our local criminal justice system here in Nashville is they pulled statistics from how many people get booked. So in Nashville, sometimes you get a citation for something for driving, like driving without a license, and then you have to go turn yourself in. And they pulled statistics about how many people, once they got the citation, went and turned themselves in and dealt with it, and how many people didn't. The average of how many people didn't go is 14%. Among Hispanic people, it was, I want to get this right, in this past year, 3.5%. So our immigrant population, and I find this true in the people I speak to as well as in the statistics, are oftentimes so worried about trying to abide by the law, much more worried in many ways than those of us who are, you know, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of things, if I do it, I'm going to get a slap on the wrist. But immigrants really are often much more concerned about following the law. That's what I see in my daily practice.
All right, thank you, ladies. I know we'll have to catch one more break. We'll have much more. Again, Open Line on this Sanctuary City Bill topic after the break.